basically, for me, the psychedelic experience was the path to revelation. It actually worked on somebody who thought nothing would work. And then, and that's still a large part of what gets talked about in these weekends, simply because there's an endless crop of new people who are interested in using these botanical materials for purposes of self-exploration, and doing that safely, sanely, and in a fully aware manner involves coordinating a lot of detail: botanical, chemical, ethnographic, geographical, evolutionary, biological, pharmacological detail, which we can spend as much time on as the group will tolerate. What I like to talk about, and what I have very little competition in terms of talking about, is the content of the psychedelic experience, which is very difficult to English or to bring into any other language, and which is not predictable or is confounding of the expectations of students of mystical experience.
It's magic, you know. Never believe it's not so. It's magic, you know. Never believe it's not so.
Alan,
Ladies and gentlemen,
you having a nightmare? What if it's true?
ladies and gentlemen,
Alan, it's a possibility, isn't it?
the very word secrecy is repugnant
Secrets.
in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers
Constant, extreme danger.
which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger,
Extreme danger.
that an announced need for increased security
This is Conspiracy Queries with Alan Carr.
will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control.
You're crazy.
And no officious, high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes.
Isn't the Pentagon suspicious that all the buildings would blow up?
Or to withhold from the press and the public
I think you're just looking at things for the first time.
the facts they deserve to know.
You've had your whole f***ing life to think things over. What good's a few minutes more gonna do you now?
The facts they deserve to know. They deserve to know. Deserve to know. Deserve to know. They deserve to know.
Episode 56 and 128. That's where we are. Green Crush, Allen Park, episode 56. We're back from Legalize. Legalize. They even tell you in the word, right? They even mention it in the word. Legalize. They've wrapped it up in legalize. They've legalized it. There are lawyers fucking thrilled right now that a whole series of poorly drafted, mistake-filled, fact-ignoring rulings are somehow going to be the thing that now controls the direction of our life. I mean, I can't even believe it. But I can, because we've been calling it constantly for just over a year and a half now. We are Green Crush. We are coming to you live from downtown Toronto. The place doesn't matter anymore. It just matters that we are coming to you live. It's been a while. I've been taking a while to get this out of my system. You'll hear this as well on next week's show. It's taking some time to get it out of my system, but we have had this illegal cannabis for such a long time, and now it's legal. And what does that mean? It means a lot of mistakes. It means a lot of sober minds shouldn't really brag about it. Shouldn't really brag about being sober. We had a lot of reasons, I think, why it took so long. And now, if you're following along from around the world, Canada was going to, it seemed like our new prime minister at the end of 2015 anyway, he was going to usher in a time of, he was even known to have used cannabis and was very acting cool, I guess would be the thing, against the other conservative government here. Oh yeah, no, when I get in, we're going to legalize this thing, and oh boy, and we all believed it, or so many of us did. And he has brought forward a legalized template of which to use this product. But it's certainly not what so many of us had hoped for. And when I say that, us, I mean the folks that understand what it is and how it works. And that there are very much so a multitude of very well-researched papers, experiments that have gone well, notations have been made, and yet still you have people wandering around in this day and age thinking, well, they don't have any tests on it or anything, so that's why it's still illegal. But that's not really why it was illegal. And why did they need to change the timing of this? They said that initially it was going to be probably, coming out in 2016. Everybody jumped the gun on that one. They said, no, it's actually going to come out next year, which was 2017. And then we all knew that was going to be, legalizing day would have been April 20th, 420 as they call it. But then that sort of got punted to Canada Day, and maybe they'll call it Cannabis Day. And then that got punted to October 17, 2018. And the reason they moved it to October 17, 2018 was they needed the time that they said they would need to make sure everything is ready. Of course, not much at all is ready. Your order that you placed online on the Ontario Cannabis Store, there's a very good chance that here as we sit into November now, that you don't have that order yet. So order now your cannabis order from the OCS. Order now to make sure you get yours in time for Christmas 2019. They're shit. They're not ready. They don't have Plan B. Whoa, I have to get Plan B. Go. You don't have a Plan B. Remember how you were saying how you were ready? No one said, well, we think we're ready, and if we're not, we'll just jump into Plan B. No one said that. You are full of shit. This is the thing that I can't stand. So many people are just letting it happen. Oh, yeah, well, they said they were going to do that. They're not ready. They need to be called out as liars. This is the chance that we have to do this. Not later, not 20 years from now when we go, oh, they rolled it out really badly back in the late teens. It's 1935 now. If only they didn't fuck it up so bad in 2015 through 2018, it would have been better than now. This is what I don't want to wait for, folks. So they've been punting around the time frames while they tell us they care about us. And you know they care about us because what did they do? They sent a whole bunch of letters to opioid manufacturers. 105 opioid manufacturers have received a stern letter from the government. Not to do that anymore, please. Don't make those. And only 25% of those actually responded. Can you imagine them going to cannabis dispensaries in Kensington or somewhere on Queen Street? Oh, we're not going to arrest you. We're not going to take all of your goods. And some of us cops aren't going to steal those bars and then eat them like a couple of idiots and then get snagged up a tree and then have a judge tell me I'm the biggest goof ever and then I have to quit my job. Not just those kind of cops. But, I mean, imagine if they just said, hey, we sent letters to all the dispensaries in the city, and 25% of them sent us a letter back saying they didn't feel like closing. So that's how we're being tough. Why are they able to do that with cannabis, which works well, and they're not able to do that with opioids? Why do they let the Sackler family continue to make opioids? Why does that happen? Why do they tell us we need to make sure we're not ruining our brains by using cannabis before the age of 25, 6 years old? Why do they tell us that? And also look forward to our youngsters and our late teens signing up for military duty, as though that doesn't damage your brain also. Can we get a line of consistency? Can we get a rudder coming from someone in power? Why did it take all summer long? Well, of course, they had to have this summer. It sounded like we were going to have Canada Day cannabis, and we needed a summer, though. As the CBC wrote in one of the things they wrote back in July 11th, cannabis marketers are enjoying a summer of schmooze ahead of the legislative crackdown. That's why it took until October, because the pot companies that have been working with Bill Blair, the architect of the cannabis access in Canada, former police officer, you know, so he's got your best interest at heart, needed to give these boys some time to sink their hooks deeply into profiting from this thing once it legalized. So Canadians will be surrounded by the logos of new recreational cannabis brands at a variety of fun events this summer. This is from the summer that just went by, as pot purveyors are exploiting a once-in-a-lifetime chance to market their products before government restrictions fully kick in. That's why the summer. That's why it took so long. Because the people that have never sold this stuff before needed time to be able to take people who were selling it and tell the government that they're criminals and not send them letters, but actually arrest them and steal their product so that they could be the official purveyor. Now, why it is that we can have some cannabis purveyors putting their logo out at concerts while the government says don't use anything popular or a logo to promote a concert. Like, you've really got to get your shit together, Bill. Summertime concerts here, Jethro Tull and rapper Kendrick Lamar were doing concerts in Toronto with the Tweed logo. Was everywhere at the Toronto Budweiser stage. So there's the government allowing and promoting cannabis consumption while they're promoting booze consumption, which is statistically far worse than cannabis consumption. But you can't mention cannabis because you're selling booze or something. And these people really think that they're the paragons of clear thought. It's amazing to me what they think they are. The CBC has finally realized you cannot die from cannabis. So they had to backtrack on their cannabis overdose bullshit. Oh, it's so full of bullshit at the old CBC. Media lies about cannabis overdose dangers was partly inspired by the CBC story that spread misinformation and fear with this headline: spike in cannabis overdoses blamed on potent edibles and poor public education. Well, it seems the CBC is backtracking over its usage of the term cannabis overdose after significant backlash on social media and talking to a few doctors, you know, to get the facts. Welcome to journalism. So yeah, those pot rallies. So we had those here in Canada. I wish I had some names for you of who did really well. But of course, in Bloomberg and Fortune magazine in the States says the pot rallies of the summer minted new billionaires. So now I don't know if that reaches into Canada. I can't imagine why it wouldn't. But the first private equity firm focused exclusively on the cannabis industry has spawned 3 billionaires. That's why they needed the summer. Brendan Kennedy, Michael Blue, and Christian Grove founded Seattle-based Privateer Holdings in May 2010, and then the firm later invested in Canadian pot firm Tilray, whose market value topped $21 billion Wednesday after surging more than 1,200% in the past 2 months. Billionaires. That's why we needed more time. We needed more time to make sure the people that have always sold this and are friends of yours and you know that their stuff is okay could be replaced by people who needed a summer of bending the ears of politicians to be able to make sure they could suck on down some huge profits while the rest of us are dealing with a kind of bullshit like the complete list of punishments for driving high on marijuana. Let's talk about driving high. Let's talk about it with our guest when he gets here, which will be in a couple of seconds. He's very close by. I wanted to mention something else about driving, is that in the States, so the problem with driving here, of course, is that you are going to be found positive for cannabis. They're going to equate that for being positive for being impaired. Unfortunately, a court rules medical cannabis users cannot be charged with DUI in the Arizona Court of Appeals. So we will be building on this, because that court has ruled that the state's medical cannabis patients who have been charged with a DUI may contest the charges against them. This is from December 28, 2016, just a couple of years old. The Arizona Court of Appeals last week ruled the state's medical cannabis patients who have been charged with DUI may contest the charges against them, forcing law enforcement officials to prove henceforth that those found with THC in their systems were too impaired to operate a vehicle. Trouble is, they don't have that way. They don't have those means. There is not a machine. They want there to be a machine, but there isn't a machine. This to me speaks to and we'll bring our guest in here. Our guest is with us today. In the studio is sneaking in here, but I know that Cy from High Magazine is going to have some input on this notion that police officers, as I was just explaining to the crowd, to the folks listening, welcome to come in here. Thanks for coming in here today, Cy. Is that, oh, now we got you. Okay, so there we go. How's that?
Thanks for having me.
There we go.
Awesome.
Thank you. So what I'm trying to get over here is that the police, and let's say that the guy who crafted cannabis laws for Canada is or was a cop, still has the mindset of a police officer. The police have actually created a system that ignores this kind of information.
Oh,
that
absolutely.
Says, and they do want a machine that can justifiably, accurately tell if someone is impaired, as they do have a machine like this for alcohol. And if I drink more alcohol than you, I will read higher on that machine, etc. And they're very comfortable with it, and they want that. But this is what's funny to me about cannabis and the way they say it affects your mind and your brain. Yeah, you want that. Great. I want a car that flies and I never have to put fuel in it. They just don't exist. So you want that machine, but it doesn't exist. And so instead of that, they're rolling out the Draeger 5000, where they say it does that. And they're just going to go ahead with this bullshit move.
Well, it's one thing to measure THC levels in the bloodstream or saliva, but it's totally another thing to measure cognitive ability while using cannabis. I know people who can smoke, a significant amount or consume a significant amount of cannabis and drive like it's no problem at all. I know other people, they take 3 hits on a joint and they're stupid. They cannot move. I would not want them driving. So the different amounts for different people, until we can address how it's affecting people cognitively during roadside tests in conjunction with what the THC levels might be in your bloodstream or in your saliva, then perhaps, and this is going to be a little bit away, I think, then we can perhaps a little more accurately gauge what's safe in the public environment.
Well, we have some reports coming out now that there's more than a few reports that are saying that it doesn't impair as much. I don't even like that phraseology as alcohol. It doesn't impair as much, and then some say it doesn't impair at all. But then it's like, what test do they look at? What test do they use to create the law?
I'm sure there's a variety of different tests available right now, probably internationally in the U.S., and I'm sure we're going to see some of these tests emerging here in Canada as well. It's a tricky subject, Alan.
Thank you.
It really is. The people who created this law come from a law enforcement background, so we see where they're coming from. They tell us that they have the public's best interest at heart. Medical patients will tell you, well, hey, you don't have my best interest at heart.
Right. Well, let's go right to that. I mean, it's fascinating to me. I don't subscribe, or I am not a medical patient per se.
Neither am I,
as they say. And so at this point, I have been reading things about how medical users have not been able to get their supply ever since the.
Well, not just supply. Let's talk for a second about the increased cost of medicating. If you're on social assistance or disability, how the hell are you going to pay for your medication now when they've upped the prices, they've reduced the quality, and they've added so much tax? There are good groups out there like James O'Hare and CFAM who are really fighting the good battle to have make sure that cannabis is not taxed, that cannabis as medicine is not taxed.
Right.
And that's the thing that's disgusting me the most right now.
Tell me about it.
With our Ontario cannabis stores, or the cannabis stores in general, the amount of tax that they are putting on, making it cost prohibitive for people who are on disability, who are struggling with their health to find proper access to the medication of their choice.
It's incredible. I mean, they keep telling us. I'm going to shoot this one day. I'm still working it out, but I'm working on this little bit that's kind of like the pea and the 3 cups.
Okay.
Right? You know that thing where you
that little
sleight of hand
game. Yeah.
It's a Swizz, right? It's a ripoff. 3-card Monty is another version of it. And so basically they tell us it's like certain things. And then you go, oh, okay, well, it's like cigarettes. Okay, well, it's dangerous and has to be regulated like tobacco. Oh, okay, that's what you're saying.
We're seeing it emerge as both a medical necessity for a lot of people and a new recreational model. So it makes it a little more difficult on the public too when we're seeing all these new rec brands emerge, really pushing things home, like the Saturday brand or any of Hexo's new brands. They're coming across as like Coors or Budweiser or any of the big marketing that's coming out of alcohol brands. But then we're seeing all the struggles going on with the medical patients. And I know a lot of medical patients who are terrified right now that their medical programs, that their LPs are going to stop taking care of them, that they're going to be shuffled to the side in favor of recreation and more money.
ACMPR is now done deal, isn't it?
Yes,
I mean, unless you have managed to keep it going, once it's ended, it's over. So that's a problem, isn't it? Or is it?
Well, it's an evolving system, and it is going to be a problem for a lot of people.
If you're just listening from overseas, we have a program here called ACMPR, or we had it. And it stood for access to cannabis medicine patients, something.
Regulations, I think.
Yeah. So anyway, that meant if you were a medical patient that it allotted you so much, whatever it is. I don't know the whole system they had, but it doesn't matter now because it's all gone, right? I mean, unless you
dotted your I's and crossed your T's and jumped over every hurdle they put in front of you to keep that paperwork up to date. And a lot of people didn't, which is unfortunate. It's an evolving system right now. I'd like to think that there are enough people out there fighting for the medical patients that the medical patients will not be forgotten. Mind you, I am an optimist, and I like to try to look at the best in things. I know we have a very imperfect system right now, but it beats no system at all, and I do like that.
Right. So we're an inch in, right?
Well,
we're an inch in when we needed our yard.
Okay, I'm a visual artist. I paint, I sculpt. I can't go in on a first attempt or even a second or third attempt and produce a masterpiece of work. I need to go in on a first pass, do a second pass, do a third pass.
Okay, we're going to need some better guests.
We're look at it from an arts perspective.
Okay.
This is a canvas that is nowhere near completion. We've just started this tapestry of legal cannabis in Canada, and it's very basic. And we're going to have to build on it, and we're going to have to improve on it. And people like you and other activists and advocates in the industry are going to have to continue to call out our federal government, and people are going to have to demand changes to the things that we don't like about this new legislation. It'll take time, like any good work of art, and in maybe 10 years we'll work out some of the kinks.
Well, the thing is that this system that you say, the kinks, I said it earlier in the show, or maybe it was in next week's show, which we've already recorded portions thereof, but I don't understand why there's so much resistance to it all the time when you keep getting these facts going our way. I mean, the whole reason they're changing anything right now is because, well, in the first place, it was completely illegal, and then I wasn't doing it, but folks on our side of the fence fought so hard to be able to make sure there was so hemp and there was so medical cannabis.
Yes.
And that took a long time, and then you're all through the 90s, and then ever since then, and the Parker ruling, and now we're at this thing. Like, they keep pushing back so hard, and when we eventually get to the place where we're supposed to be, it's okay, we're good. Why do they keep fighting so hard against? Like, put it this way. You say, well, I'm an optimist and I know they'll get to it eventually. But what is it in the planning of the laws or rules and regs in a situation like this where it's okay to just take a guess and throw something out and hope it works out okay? As they said in BC, we are building the plane while we're flying it. No one does that in the aviation industry. You plan the plane, you figure it out, you get a blueprint, you build the fucking thing, and then you see that it flies.
Now, if Trudeau would have came out and said, yes, I promise that I will legalize cannabis in Canada, but listen, I'm going to need 10 years to do it, he would have lost that election. If he would have backtracked after what he screwed up on his electoral reform, if he would have backed up on cannabis legislation, that would have been the end of his career. And then we have so many bigger players and all these big companies coming to board, putting pressure. I'm sure there's a lot of lobbyists in Ottawa that are putting a significant amount of pressure. And I hear about meetings going on with premiers in PEI and in Alberta and health ministers, and there are so many aspects of this. And ultimately, we're seeing a very regulated group, government officials, trying to regulate what has been fundamentally a criminal activity, a criminal network that runs through Canada very strongly over the last 20, 50 years. The only way they see they can take that away from the unregulated market is how they're doing it now. We don't like it. I don't like it. None of my unregulated friends like it. People who've been running dispensaries or running their own grows, or who are passionate about working in the industry with hopes that they would get grandfathered in, they don't care for it either. But unfortunately, it's the cards we've been dealt.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And so now you have to be vigilant that every single new deal from a new card is the right deal and not from the bottom of the deck, and doing it properly, right?
I agree. And watching things like patience over profits, good moral cores and directions for some of these companies. I see some of these companies out there, and I'm a little disgusted with how opportunistic they are. Or I'll talk with a large group who are very passionate about cannabis, who've never even tried it, which is kind of like, it's hard to have a discussion with someone about how important cannabis is in Canadian society who's never even tried it.
I just think it's right. I don't want to do it myself.
All they know is what they've heard about CBD. They only know a little bit. I attended the Everything About Sex show a couple weeks ago, and I usually attend a lot of these cannabis conferences. And I've been getting a little disgruntled with the cannabis conferences. It's always the same people, the same businesses, the same group of individuals out there pushing cannabis forward. So I decided I'd try something different. I went to this Sex show.
The Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex.
It was the best show I've been to in probably 2 years. hundreds and hundreds of curious people who knew absolutely nothing about cannabis. I think because we work
at
in
the sex show.
At the sex show, I think because we live and breathe cannabis advocacy and activism, and we work within the Canadian cannabis industry. We take it for granted that everybody is as well versed in cannabis as we are. And when it comes down to it, they're not. The entire country is still learning what this is all about.
That's true, yeah.
And I find that it was very easy to take it for granted that, you would know what CBD is. You know what THC, you know about the cannabinoid system. Because we hear about this thing all the time.
Sure.
You and I are very well versed in what cannabis can do for you. And a lot of people out there I've discovered recently are not. And that I found was very heartening.
What was so great about the sex show, though, that was so much better for you than they were just presenting things in a fresher way, or what?
It was every single person who came to my booth was curious about cannabis and what it could do for them. All they read about is all this controversy in the papers, but there's not enough information, street level information, and people are really just figuring it out. They're trying to put the stigma and all the misinformation, for the most part, behind them and learn about a new thing that's out there. It's new for a lot of people. It's just not new for us, and I think it's important to keep that in mind. We're fighting to make sure that these people, as they get used to cannabis, can experience the cannabis like we want them to. Right. We have this ideal of how cannabis should be in Canada. It should be, inexpensive. It should be accessible. It should be regulated, and it should be kept out of the hands of really big business. And we should respect the people who have come before us, all the growers and all the unregulated people who have really pushed this industry forward.
Right.
I just think that we get so caught up in that we forget about all the new users, the ones who really don't know anything about cannabis.
Yeah, I'm glad that people are going to a sex show and hoping to. They didn't hope to find out. You were just there, right?
It's not. Well, myself and there were at least 4 or 5 other cannabis-based businesses, and I'm seeing the same thing at tattoo shows and art shows and farmers markets, where there's such a curiosity, a hunger for more information about cannabis as a whole.
Yeah,
so it is exciting. I'm seeing so much positive energy around this new cannabis industry as well, and I know that it is not perfect, and it is a bit of a clusterfuck all the way around. But that being said, we're at the beginning of something really amazing, and people who have never looked at cannabis before as an option are now starting to look at it. Mind you, there are problems. The cost being one.
What do you figure is the reason for that? The cost being a high cost. What's making it a high cost across the board?
Okay, well, we have a higher standard of regulations that these LPs have to. That they have the really. I'm going to use this expression again, dot their I's and cross their T's. Everything has to be perfect. They have to follow a checklist of security options, of health and safety, and they have the public watching them constantly in case they screw up. The first time an LP screws up, or as LPs are screwing up online, I see people on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram ripping LPs apart every single day for the smallest things. Yeah, they use too much packaging. Yeah, that particular strain is crap. Oh, wow, you milled that particular strain. Oh, yes, it's also too expensive.
Right.
People are unwilling to let the LPs get away with anything right now. We're watching them as a public so closely. I think we're really going to watch them evolve.
But don't you think that's a better approach than just letting them run in a wanton
Absolutely,
fashion?
Absolutely. I think they need to be watched.
Yeah.
But I also think that I think we have to trust in a little bit that some of these, they're not all bad groups. They're not all these filthy millionaires who are trying to make money off the backs of cannabis.
No, but we don't have to buy Molson Canadian beer.
We don't. We can buy.
I
like
buy
craft
all
beer.
Kinds of different beer that I want to try, and I do have a Molson once in a while because maybe that's all they sell at a ballpark or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's so locked in with cannabis. It's like, oh, you don't have that? Well, can I go to a different place? No, you have to get it from here. That's the part that's really not easy to swallow when you're going to give these LPs the run of the yard, and then say, "Oh, you can't buy it anywhere
I will
else."
probably never order LP weed. Probably never. I'm not a medical patient. I have no interest in paying that much for my cannabis.
Yeah.
I'm a rec user. I've always been a rec user. And I know a lot of people like me who will probably never go that route. I might go check out the Ontario cannabis stores when they open. When I'm in Alberta next week, I may go check out some of the shops. It's my mother would never buy cannabis off a dispensary or an online store, but she would definitely go online and buy it off the Canadian government because she's a senior and she trusts in her government. Maybe not entirely, but that's the only kind of group that she would ever purchase off of. And there are a lot of people like that who they don't want to be involved in something that was black market. They don't want to be going behind a dispensary to pick up cannabis. They want to get it easily and legally in their eyes.
Right. And what were you saying though about cannabis that's coming from a larger purveyor that may not be as high quality, etc.? Like how, those are the lines that people are really trying to keep
How
an eye
long
on.
do you think people are going to be spending top dollar for substandard cannabis? Not very long. It's not going to take long for these companies, for the bad companies to show themselves as inferior, and the public is very picky about what they're purchasing. They're just not going to buy crap. And we saw this massive influx due to curiosity when the cannabis stores first opened, but they continue to sell crap. People are not going to buy off them. I will not go to a grocery store that sells me crap food. Why would I go to an LP that's going to sell me crap cannabis? I love cannabis. I like the taste. I consider myself a connoisseur. I like certain strains. If I can't get those strains, or if I'm paying through the nose for them when I don't have to, that's what irks me.
Yeah.
And then we tie in things like indigenous culture, and we've got like the Tyendinaga or the First Nations outside of Hamilton that are these thriving cannabis communities that they're sovereign land. I can still go to those places and not pay tax.
Right.
It's just a lot of people will go take that direction as well.
Yeah. Well, I sure hope that it's definitely my intention to get the word out on as much of the science and the truth of this topic as possible.
Oh, absolutely.
I would hate to see the First Nations people of this country taking another bad ride on initially
Are you familiar
the territory
with what's going on in Tyendinaga outside of Kingston in Shannonsville?
Not as much as I should be.
There's some amazing stuff going on.
What's happening there?
So last year they hosted the very first Indigenous Cannabis Cup. It was Smoke Signals. It's a very large dispensary model that operates out of the Tyendinaga, run by Jamie Kunkel. And they had an amazing turnout. Their town has been transformed. The reservation, the Tyendinaga Mohawk territories.
This is on the way to Kingston.
On the way to Kingston. It is near Shannonsville. It's got 4,200 people in the town. It must have over 40 dispensaries. Job creation is through the roof.
That's hilarious.
It's got 2 little gas stations, or 2 or 3 little gas stations, but it has a very thriving cannabis community, and has for a couple of years now. And it provides jobs for so many people in that region, and people drive from almost a 200-kilometer
for the experience overall.
They even have a tour bus that takes you there, a Tyendinaga tour bus, so you can experience what cannabis culture is like on the Mohawk territory.
From the perspective of these people better connected to the history of this country than I feel like I am, that's for sure.
Also supplying quality, tested, regulated products for their clients. And that's important to them as well. There's nobody out there producing, and if they are, it's not being purchased, unregulated, untested. All the bakers I know are sending their distillate in for testing. All the people who produce flower extracts are having that tested. Yeah. I seldom see a product now that doesn't come down the line without a testing sheet. So that's something that's we really moved towards over the last couple of years, is where testing has become a priority, because nobody wants to be smoking crap.
No one wants to buy a crummy thing,
and if we can trust our unregulated growers to look after us all these years.
Well, that's what I was noticing was a lot of people who in Ontario, like I didn't buy any, but a lot of people I know in Ontario who I don't know how many there were that did this, but just to test to see what it's like. Like, okay, I'll buy 6 grams of stuff, and I'll get 4 different kinds and 2, just like to see how it was going to come on down. And to get that. But now that people have done that, I don't think people are going to keep continuing to do that.
I don't know. There's great groups like Strain Print Analytics is a good example, and they've been taking data from patients and collecting it and analyzing it, and they've created this really good research model, this analytics program that really helps people find out what strain is good for what ailment based on all the people who have contributed their experiences. So I think people are cannabis is so complex. You can't just go out and pick up a bud and go, oh, I've tried cannabis.
Right.
There's sativa, indicas.
That's like saying, have you eaten food before?
Yeah. Hybrids or edibles or concentrates or, it's funny though. The one thing that legalization has affected the most though is, in my opinion, shatter providers have just disappeared over the last 3 weeks.
Really? Why is that? How does that go?
Well, shatter, you know what shatter is, of
Sure.
course. Okay, so areas like Hamilton, Stony Creek, they used to have a really high concentration, excuse my joke.
There's a pun there, folks.
Of
shatter
manufacturers.
Yeah.
Shatter was a big thing in our unregulated market.
Right.
But now fines and enforcement are so heavy, especially when it comes to concentrates, that a lot of the really good concentrate manufacturers have just shut down. So my office is like overwhelmed with calls from people who can't find that particular type of medication, who actually won't go back or can't go back to smoking flower because they're used to such a high dose for their own.
But if you don't get the shatter for a while, won't your tolerance for the dose go down? You can go back to flower again.
You could do a cleanse and kind of reset your cannabinoid systems. Take a couple days off. But at the same time, a lot of the people who are moved over to shatter have chosen to do so because it's stronger and it's more effective on their pain management. If you talk to people who enjoy shatter, you'll find that 9 times out of 10 they've switched over to shatter for the medicinal benefits.
Okay, so tell me this then, because I really don't know anything about it, and we just got to legalize. What are we looking at for next year in the way of these consumables, these edibles
and oils? I understand there's a lot of companies jumping on that right now in our research and development. Brands like Primo that make pasta sauces and olive oils are getting on board. I think we'll see. We saw O. Henry get on board around 420 with their 425 bar. Right. We're going to just start seeing more stuff like that.
And how are they finding, like if a policeman or someone hysterical is concerned about amounts taken in, and they are now telling us, let's be careful about children, how do you then go ahead in a few months start packing candy bars with weed?
Well, here, I think that just common sense is going to be a big factor. If you're going to store cannabis-based edibles in your fridge and they look like cookies or fudge or gummies or whatever, put it in a locked box. You're not going to store a gun on the counter on top of your fridge somewhere that a child can access it. You're not going to do that with your cannabis either. It's really, you're going to put your booze up. If you drink, you're going to put your cannabis in a locked box to make sure if you have kids in the house that they can't get it. So we're really going to have to start really paying attention to stuff like that.
Yeah, I just find it. This is another thing again about the children is that they say they're worried about the kids, but then what the first thing that happens is somehow they find out a way for smoking and vaping to become accessible, which they say is dangerous, and they prefer edibles, which there's no smoking and vaping. You're just taking it direct, but that's not coming till months later.
Do you watch South Park?
I know the show, sure.
Okay, so South Park's on its hopefully final season. It's a big hashtag cancel South Park.
I'm just glad they killed off Apu, because that was really...
That's The Simpsons, I think. I think you're mixing up your genres.
Yeah,
but my point, though, is they did an episode recently, I think this 2 episodes ago, where they addressed the vape pen epidemic and the cannabis epidemic in Colorado. And they were addressing things like kindergartners being attracted to the sweet tastes. And they did a real mockery of it. One of the characters now owns a cannabis farm in Colorado, Integrity Farms. And we're seeing a lot of public interest in this sort of thing. And so even seeing a show like South Park that notoriously won't take anything seriously. Addressing things like vapes in children, and it is a big thing too. Kids are going to get into their parents' liquor cabinets. Kids are going to get into their parents' cannabis. It's up to the parents to really make sure.
I've really got a different take on that, because that is so, I think, case by case and individual. Like
Probably.
Honestly, the thing about alcohol, okay, when I was a little kid, I'm only going with my experience as a little kid, and everybody has a different. But as a little kid, what I knew about alcohol was that my dad and my mom were able to drink it, but it was an adult thing, and I wasn't supposed to have it. And whenever I smelled it or beer or something, it was kind of curious, but it wasn't treated like, oh, this terrible thing. It was part of the growing up. You just don't get to have that, just like you don't get to drive a car. And later on, and so I think that having that sensibility of, yeah, it's a legal thing, but you're not ready for it yet. You're not ready to dive off the high diving board at the pool yet. You need to grow up for that. And it fits into the category of so many different things. And I think if cannabis had already been in that category also, you don't have the sneaking behind the school and smoking the joints as much, because so much of cannabis appeal is doing it because it's illegal in the first place.
True. Well, I was talking to somebody recently, a friend of mine who goes to AA, and she was explaining to me her perspectives on cannabis as it applies to AA, and how they take a very zero approach to that. Zero tolerance. Zero tolerance approach to cannabis within that program. And I was debating a little bit with her, hoping I could get her to understand that cannabis isn't like alcohol. It's not the intoxicant, or it's not the same as alcohol.
Right.
And but she was very close to that idea, and I think that's stigma. That's going to take a long time to get rid of, because it has been
decades of programming.
A lot of us got into cannabis in the first place because it was kind of notorious. It was a little bit counterculture. It was one of the last places of refuge for the counterculture revolutionaries.
Yeah,
people who can fight for change. And there's still a lot of fight.
And we still have to. So that didn't go away.
No. And it's to be honest, I feel it just started. I've published High Canada now. We're just starting at the beginning of our 4th year. So I've done 3 years as High Canada, and then a year before that as Rolling Stone. So those first 4 years were 100% in an unregulated market. I feel we've just started. Scratched the surface of how much information and education we can put out there. And that's 37 issues in. Blows my mind to think that I've barely scratched the surface and just got started.
Isn't that funny, Brad? I mean, how many? 37 now? And, and how many did you think you were going to sort of get a read on it?
Not very many, I'll be honest with you.
Because I had the same thing. I had the same thing with this show when I was coming back to leave my sickness behind and get a podcast going again. I thought, I'm going to do like 6 or 10 special episodes about the cannabis that I use, and then I'll explain everything and then get back. But it's been 60 episodes or something like that.
I think for us, the secret to our success is we focus on cannabis itself, but we focus on the people behind the plant. Cannabis is such a multifaceted topic, from manufacturers to glass blowers to concentrate providers, or people who are industrial engineers, all the way to pharmacologists. There's so many angles we can take at it, and we like to talk to the people behind the plant, talk about things like job creation, cannabis as an exit strategy for opiate addiction. It's been a real successful model for us, and there are so many more stories to tell. This month, our 37th issue, we're speaking to Raheem Dwala, and he's the pharmacist behind the Hybrid Farm model in Ottawa, which is a compounding pharmacy. So if you bring your prescriptions in to see Raheem or any of his good people at Hybrid Farm, they will take a look at that prescription and see if they can find you something.
Oh, wow. Specializing.
Yes, something maybe a little more CBD, or hook you up with some doctors or a medical cannabis prescription, and try to help you that way. And I'm hoping to see a lot more of these compounding pharmacies and groups like Raheem and Hybrid Farm in Ottawa leading the way.
Well, let me just take a second here. I want to, people have been asking so many times, what are you thinking about legalization, etc.? What's going on what's your take on it, etc.? And I just wanted to play an American take.
Oh,
Now,
I love this.
This guy is actually Canadian, but this is an American take from MSNBC, talking about legal cannabis here in Canada. Here we go.
National experiment is beginning north of the U.S. border as Canada becomes only the second nation in the world to legalize recreational marijuana after Uruguay. But some Americans are concerned that the U.S. is missing out on big money by not following suit.
And Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon agrees, issuing a statement that reads in part, quote, now that our neighbor to the north is opening its legal cannabis market, the longer we delay, the longer we miss out on a potentially significant economic opportunity for Oregon and other states across the country. Currently, 9 U.S. states and Washington, D.C. legalized use of recreational pot, while more than 30 have approved medical marijuana, with California being America's largest legal market. Even so, marijuana remains illegal under U.S. federal law.
Which
it's very
means
tricky.
You can't use the banking system in the United States for any money having to do with marijuana, which makes it a cash business, which causes all sorts of problems. In Canada, that's not a problem. Let's go to Stephanie Gosk, who's live in a lineup in Montreal. Are you any closer to the front, or have you stepped out?
I actually stepped out, Ali, to give you a sense of just how long this line is. You can see behind me, it is stretching probably 2 or 3 city blocks. And now I'm just going to walk a little bit to give you an idea. The people who are already up here have already waited about 2 hours. They definitely have another couple hours to go before they're going to get to the front of the line. You know, this is actually a physical embodiment of those profits and that money that you were talking about the United States losing out on right here on the streets in Canada. One of the reasons, though, that this line is as long as it is that there aren't really that many stores opening up today in Canada. There is a website that people are using to buy marijuana, but here in Quebec, just one of 10 provinces and 3 territories in the country, there are 10 stores. British Columbia just has 1. Ottawa, the province, has none. So people that are there have to go onto the website. You know, some say that actually this rollout is sort of as understated as the Canadians themselves. By the way, I'm still walking. We've gotten to the corner of the street and we're going to make this turn. It's a little dicey because there are lots of people. I'm going to ask my cameraman Ronnie if you could just pan down the street and show. You can see that flag for the province hanging there. That's actually the front of the store.
Wow.
Guys?
That's amazing. Now, look, from an economic perspective, what's the advantage to Canada doing this? How important is this to Canada's economy?
Well, you're talking about roughly $8 billion to the Canadian economy, but there's also this other promise, and that other promise is the potential that perhaps a legal market opens up in the United States. Let's say the United States years down the road decides to legalize it nationally. Well, you have these companies that are staking out their claim.
Why would they need to wait that long? You hear the way she just says, well, these companies in the States, you know, could be years down the road, they might change, and that's why it's good for Canada to, you know, it's kind of an interesting take. It's like, why are they always, they sit there and say, well, you know, if Canada does that in just a few short decades, we'll also be able to, you know what I mean? Like, what's with the resistance levels are so high?
That video felt like they were reporting on a Black Friday sale.
Yeah.
The pandemonium, the craziness, the hype, the consumer traffic, the loss of money.
And they don't show anybody there the next day when it's all sold out and nobody can get anything.
To be honest, would you wait 4 hours for 3 grams of cannabis?
I've never done that once.
I won't wait 3 hours in line for anything.
That's pretty incredible. Yeah. Well, So tell us. I'm fascinated about I didn't realize the Rolling Stone aspect. You were the purveyor of Rolling Stone, the magazine.
Rolling
Is
Stone.
that a sore
we
story?
Did that for a year. No, that's a fine story. I started. I ran a arts collective in Kensington Market about 5.5 years ago, and we were really struggling with funding. And it was around the same time that the dispensary market was really starting to flourish here in Toronto. So I noticed that there was a real lack of cannabis information and education. So I teamed up with Marijuana Information Bureau based out of downtown Toronto, which I believe is still in existence as Cannabis and Coffee. And we put out a very celebrity-driven, in-your-face, black market Rolling Stone magazine, where we see geez, we broke every rule there was. We put people on our cover without permission. We had Lady Gaga on one issue, Willie Nelson, Snoop Dogg. It was a black market magazine, but it allowed us to really establish our distribution, starting in Ontario, and then we did the same thing over in Vancouver and Victoria and Calgary. And we just kept going province to province. It was a little in your face, and we didn't ask for permission. We asked for forgiveness. So when we shut that down, we wanted to take a better approach to providing information and education about cannabis. Took ourselves a little more seriously and started really adopting a bit more of journalistic integrity to what we were doing. Well, we sure had fun that first 10 issues.
Pretty fun time, but now it's so what's it been basically? I mean, we've had to switch the focus of this show on hey, guess what? Cannabis can be a very healthful application to your life and may even extend your life. And here's some of the ways that you can use it. And here's how the government is about to put forth a series of mistakes. Now they've done it. So the show isn't about, well, let's not have them do this. It's about changing things. So how did you find a difference? Or how are you thinking about a difference from before legalized at your publication and now it's different? So
we've been going through a transition for the last few months. We've had to say goodbye to a lot of our unregulated advertisers that made up at least 60% of our advertising base. As a free magazine, we really depend on our advertisers to cover things like print and distribution. But we lost about half of our advertisers over the last amicably over the last few months, and we've been slowly but surely replacing them with new auxiliary and supplemental companies that are regulated and will comply. A lot of these advertising and marketing restrictions apply to the LPs, to licensed producers, licensed manufacturers, and a lot of the companies that had been working with us have either shut down or they're working themselves to transition. So we're putting our new magazine out this month, and it's our first 100% compliant issue where we're doing our very best to dot our I's and cross our T's and do everything that the federal government is asking of us. Our magazine is geared towards people who are 18 and over, so we send out mail-out subscriptions to adults. We send out copies of the magazine to age-verified shops and services, so we can do our best to keep this information and this magazine out of the hands of youth and not market towards youth.
And as the purveyor of the magazine, how do you deal with or my very shoddy at this point interpretation of what the government says you can't have mascots, etc., famous people,
no mascots,
whatever.
No celebrities,
no
characters. There's a lot of it's just creative marketing. I've been in marketing my entire life.
Right. So you're not going to have a Captain Morgan type of rum character who is a swashbuckling, daring do kind of booze purveyor. You can't have that with weed.
Or the Marlboro Man.
Or the Marlboro. Well, they finally figured out they shouldn't have that. But
well, then we're going to start seeing things like hemp-based cigarettes. And how are the tobacco and cannabis laws going to apply to that?
Right.
As long as you're... I think that if we find a happy balance right now between what the federal government is expecting in terms of our marketing and advertising restrictions and still find a way to be honest and give good information about what is available out there, work with the companies that are actively trying to comply and exist within this new world, I think we'll be okay.
But just for an example, like if you had a Paul Newman's salad dressing where his picture is on the cover of it, it's evocative of Paul Newman, the famous actor, is his company. He's got it on there. Okay, fine. So have that in your mind for a second. Now take a look at, say, Uncle Ben or something, or Aunt Jemima, who's not a real person.
Still, it's a character,
but it's a character selling, Uncle Ben's converted rice or whatever. So you can't have any kind of real people. So So is that right? Like you can't have a Snoop Dogg and
No,
and
you
tweet?
can't have a Snoop Dogg.
Well, what did he do? I mean, he signed a deal and then all the paperwork changed?
I guess he made a lot of money on that
I
deal.
guess so, yeah.
I know I got to see Snoop Dogg perform recently at the Namaste party in Montreal recently, and that was kind of interesting. That was a big show of
But you can't have him anymore.
No, you can't.
But you
That's
can't
why we had this summer of celebrity-driven concerts and cannabis companies or LPs getting behind all these big celebrity endorsements while they could.
Where's the credibility, though, that we're in a town like Toronto, say, you're coming in on the lakeshore, say you're coming in from the airport or something, and you're reading the latest findings, which are, from the, we can't have a Snoop Dogg, associating his music or whatever with this substance. It's terrible. And then you're driving by the Budweiser music stage where they have concerts and they sell beer. I mean, what is going on?
Well, then we see groups like the Tragically Hip adding a cannabis leaf to their logo, right? And totally embracing cannabis culture.
Right. So why is that? And I'm okay with the Tragically Hip.
Yeah, me too.
Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's wrong. I'm
think
just
it's
saying,
great.
as a purveyor of the laws, how do you, with the same face, go, well, we can't have music and cannabis associated, and then you've got the Budweiser stage. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, and it's redundant and kind of idiotic. I think that, like we said, or we were speaking about earlier, we have a framework right now, and it is far, far from perfect. And this is one of those things that I think we're going to see keep coming back, maybe even within the court system. So there'll be some challenges to how cannabis can be advertised and marketed around.
Well, not everybody is behind the curve here. Let's sing a song of praise for South Africa for a second here. South Africa, folks. Here's some fantastic news from South Africa. The Constitutional Court has ruled that the personal use of daga is not a criminal offense. Daga, of course, that's what we call weed, everybody. The right to privacy is not confined to a home or private dwelling. It will not be a criminal offense for an adult person to use or be in possession of cannabis in private space, said Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. This judgment does not specify how many grams of cannabis a person can use or have in private. Thank goodness. They're saying a person with 31 grams is a criminal here, and a person with 29 grams is okay.
Yeah.
But they figured it out in South Africa. Anyway, they've got it there. They've got some key laws that have been debated, and they've really put it forward. The court has ultimately found that the court must invoke its powers of the Constitution to order a suspension of the declaration of invalidity for a realistic period to ensure Parliament may correct the defect. In my view, a period of 24 months from the date of judgment would be appropriate. They're just going to decriminalize it. This is, we've had enough.
So easy, so simple.
Why is that? So easy, so simple. How about how Britain went right away to legalization almost with medical cannabis? Oh, from nowhere, we're not doing this ever, to all of a sudden doing it.
Mexico makes some headway that way as well.
Yeah. So these things can change, and they can change quickly, and we're constantly told they can't be, but then you see them just falling down. Is this what they're so nervous
Nothing
about?
is written in stone. We're constantly changing and evolving the laws that we live within. And I don't think this is going to be any different. It's just going to take a little bit longer, and there's no pleasing everybody. There's no
that's what they all say.
The conservatives, the liberals, the left or the right, or anybody in the middle.
Well, it's funny because I've heard a lot of people criticize this as a liberal money grab, and it's true, we do have a liberal federal government, but it's also true that the conservatives who are doing quite well with it, and they are not going to reverse it. If a different prime minister, if Andrew Scheer of Canada becomes the next prime minister in the Conservative Party, Brian Mulroney's not going to get off that American cannabis company board he sits on. He's not going to. Hey, Ernie Eves, who used to be the premier and the the finance minister, he's not getting off of that Jamaican medical cannabis company. So it's not always just about the liberal. They were in power at the time, and they're the ones that would have brought it in. But these guys have got their hands in. This isn't going to flip. once the blue team gets back in office. I really don't see that happening.
No, I don't see it either. We have a big event coming up in Ottawa in 2 weeks. It's the first really big cannabis expo since legalization. It's called the Cannabis Hemp Expo. It's a big industry day on November 23rd at the Shaw Centre in Ottawa, and then 2 big days of expo at the Shaw Centre in Ottawa. We've been really looking forward to this. So it's been really interesting to see the evolution of the trade shows, the cannabis trade shows.
Post-legalized,
There were so many LPs and manufacturers and all these big groups out of the States attending in the summer. So I'm very interested and anxious to see how this type of trade show is going to develop now things are legal. And it being in Ottawa, of all places, it's going to make for a very poignant show indeed.
I think so. Ottawa is, we were there last year, Kim, I think, at that particular event, and it'd be interesting to see how it goes this time. From the government, this is a great point. This gentleman, Gavin Nascimento, says this about, because one of my biggest things about this whole cannabis legalization is that, while all the things are true, that they have made it legal and now we can build from a slightly better position, etc., but they've been sitting on a lot of things, and I really don't like the fact that they tell us and they tell children that children should not have any contact with cannabis whatsoever. This is a blatant falsehood. It says here, Gavin Nascimento writes, if we aren't being taught how to grow our own food, how to take care of ourselves and our families, and how to live without the need for huge governments, banks, or corporations, as our ancestors once did, then we aren't being educated. We are being indoctrinated to be dependent and subservient to the system. And I think if you look at the cannabis legalization in Canada, it's pretty hard to argue your way out of that one.
A little bit elitist, the version of legalization we've received, no doubt about it. Very corporate, and really doesn't take the people who have come and done all the hard work, the street level people, the activists, the advocates, into account at all.
No.
It's basically saying, hey, it's ours now, and we're going to make way more money than you could have possibly ever made, and we're just going to take it away from you.
Because we don't have goons necessarily. The Montreal police. Now, you're going to have to help me out with Montreal and Quebec here.
So
because
I read
really
this morning Mark Emery was hired a lawyer to start a civil case.
He was trying to get arrested in Sunday. He was trying to get arrested in
that shouldn't
Quebec.
be too hard.
Well, he couldn't get arrested. This is funny because, you literally can't get arrested. He was on the street, on the main drag, I think it was on St. Catherine Street, trying to sell, I'll say this, accoutrement. For cannabis accoutrement in front of some kind of cannabis store, and trying to get arrested because, from what I can understand, he wants to test the laws, which we all understand are shit. So he didn't get arrested, and the cops literally told him, we're not prepared to enforce those laws right now. So that's why, because they're going to fall apart under the pressure of
and yes, he will scream bloody murder to everybody who will listen if he got arrested too, which would be great.
So we'll
I
see what
personally would
happens.
like to get a ticket for consuming in public in Victoria. Victoria is one of my favorite places to visit. Visit over the last couple of years, and I loved when it was the edible capital of Canada, and they were so free and open. So I find it very interesting that they've taken such a hard-nosed approach to cannabis consumption in public in Victoria.
Well, because edibles you don't need to see that.
Well, there was one point in maybe not too long ago, maybe 18 months ago, that Victoria was the edible capital of Canada. Every shop was set up like a bakery.
Wow.
It was amazing there. But they quickly learned that things get out of hand.
Right.
And they pulled back. Gone the totally opposite direction.
So just back to Quebec for a second.
Okay.
So what's your read on there? Because while I don't like the fact that you're not allowed to have any plants there at all now, they've had against the 4-plant rule. This creates a very imbalanced series of pressures and regulations for the Joe average Canadian from coast to coast, because every province has a different set of rules.
If you lived in Manitoba, it's very different as opposed closer to Quebec than Ontario.
Isn't it the fault of the federal government for this, though?
Absolutely. I'm to this day, I'm not sure why they gave provinces such leeway. so much birth to come up with their own. They should have set one set of rules and regulations.
Like I can't even drive it home from the purveyor's store sometimes. Like in Saskatchewan, you can go to the store to buy it, but if you get caught with it in your car on the way home, you're in trouble. Like what is that?
And then there's the 4-plant rule. So are those you can own 4 plants, you can grow 4 plants, but where do you get your genetics from?
Right.
So are the LPs actively producing genetics for sale right now, or most people are under the assumption they can grow 4 plants at home and get their seeds wherever they want. So there's a lot of info.
Yeah.
What happens when in 6 months when we're going to see a massive influx of grow at home herb
arrests? Well, here in Montreal, this is why I was getting to this. Not only do they not let you have the plants, not only we've had to deal with this for such a long time, or they're not. It's completely different, the laws there compared to other places. They've also got a certain allocation for millions of dollars for next year. They're going to spend $5 million in Montreal just to hunt the marijuana dealers and buyers who are not buying the government version. I mean, this is amazing. They're going to spend $5 million trying to arrest and punish people for... Anyway, the whole thing.
So they saw an opportunity for job creation and jumped on that. Is that what that is?
I guess so.
Now we have a wonderful Quebec correspondent who usually keeps us abreast of all things going on in Quebec. Her name is Jen Larry. She works for the CBD Strategy Group. And Jen was telling us recently how the rest of Canada doesn't really understand what's going on in Quebec in terms of cannabis legislation and regulation because of the translation barrier. All these things are happening over there, and nothing's getting translated and sent out to the rest of Canada. So people like Jen Larry have been working hard to make sure they disseminate that information so that the rest of the country can find out what's going on in Quebec. There's a lot of people asking us what is going on in Quebec, and we can't honestly always tell them because unfortunately I'm not bilingual and we're not hearing a lot about what is really going on, mostly from what I'm told due to the translation issue.
Okay, well, you can't hide behind that forever.
Not forever, but I think people are working on correcting that right now, so I think the rest of the country is going to be very educated about Quebec, much like we've gone through this massive education when it comes to Alberta and cannabis. Alberta's gone through a revolution, a renaissance when it's come to cannabis.
Well, it's pretty funny, though, because you say Alberta, and I've got a segment here I'm working on, so I don't want to tip my hand too bad on it right now.
I love going to Alberta.
For a future show, but I have here on my computer, I went to, because I was trying to understand Quebec, and I primarily understand Ontario from living here, but I'm trying to understand all the regions as best I can. When I went to Alberta, to their website, education.alberta.ca, when you type in cannabis, there it is. Sorry, there were no results from your search. So, not exactly on top of things.
I just think both Calgary and Edmonton have these vibrant cannabis communities.
Oh,
there's a wonderful web of growers and manufacturers and cannabis Cannabis at Work is based out of Alberta as well. I've had the opportunity to visit some amazing hemp-based and cannabis-based CBD farms out in Alberta, which is amazing. It looks like that's going to be the big crop out there. It's just taking farmers by storm. People are jumping on it left, right, and center, and that makes me really happy to see. Something we didn't see 10, 15 years ago. The farmers switching over to hemp production.
Just before we let you go, thanks for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I've been meaning to get in here for a while.
I know, it's been a long time, and we were trying to get you in before legalized, but hey, it worked out the way it did. I'm glad you're here today. Where can folks reach you? I mean, you're what are you? You're the publisher of High Magazine?
Yeah, so publisher and editor of High Canada Magazine. You can everything we've ever printed is available for free digital download off our website, which is that's old school, highcanada.net. We're also available at highcanadamagazine.com.
Great.
You can order our magazine for mail-out subscriptions directly to your home for approximately $4.20 an issue off our website as well.
Nice.
Yeah, we come out monthly around the 15th of every month. And as I mentioned earlier, we're just about to publish our 37th issue, the beginning of our 4th year of High Canada Magazine.
And while we don't have, everything's not all set up yet, we don't have edibles, etc. So at this time, where do we find your publication?
Well,
the hard copy.
Hard copies, you can find it at Homegrown Hydroponics. You can find it at the Hotbox Cafe in Toronto. Depends where you are in the country. I can direct you at different places. We have a list, ever-changing list of places.
Okay, let's say if I was in Field, Ontario.
Then I would recommend you go to our website and either download a free digital copy or feel free to have that mailed to you at home.
There is actually a town called Field, Ontario. Yeah, it's far away from everything. It makes North Bay sound like downtown. What's this? Oh, that is true. I was going to ask about that earlier, and we got sidetracked. So before we leave, Kim, our intrepid producer, reminds me that while I'm sitting here talking about this stuff and trying to get people to understand it, I suppose technically what I am doing is I am trying to influence people to understand how great this is. You are up for an award, or you were up for an award to be an influencer.
I am. I was surprised. So Lift & Co. does an annual Canadian Cannabis Awards, and their nominations were open in September, and I was lucky enough to be nominated for 2 categories. Cannabis Crusader, which Clint Young won, and I was very happy for that. And I was also nominated for an Influencer Award. I actually feel I'm one of the very few people who've come out of the unregulated market to be nominated for this particular award.
Right.
I may win, I may not, but it was an honor to be nominated by my peers. And
when is the draw? Or when is
the award ceremony? Is November 27th. I believe it's held at the Carlu. It's
that's
already
here.
Sold out, I understand, but we'll
Yeah.
be covering it on behalf of the magazine.
Oh, you're getting it anyway because of the Carlu.
I come with some press. I'm sure you get your own press credentials at times as well.
I do? Oh.
I'm sure people go, yeah, you
well,
apply for those press passes, my friend.
Next week, I'm speaking with Amanda Siebert from Cannabis Straight, or Straight Cannabis.
That'll be exciting.
Yeah. She's going to be on next week. She's got a book out.
She's on fire right now.
She's on fire.
Yeah, doing so many great things.
Yeah, she wrote a book, so I was pretty excited about being involved in it. She interviewed me for that, so she'll be on next week, and I'm looking forward to speaking with her. But I don't have the credit. Listen, I'm not going to that thing. I can't go to the Carlu.
Why wouldn't you want to go to a
I didn't say I didn't want to go, but I'm just
Canadian
saying
Cannabis Awards?
Basically because I sit on a fence and I look. I don't mean this in an insulting kind of way, but I literally am looking down from a fence position.
Yeah.
I'm not a retailer. I'm not a purveyor. I come at this from a very specific
much
set,
like we do,
and so much like you do. So I can't feel comfortable. Like I will never be able to take money from a big purveyor unless I know a lot of things about their ethics.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so far we've not had the opportunity to do that, except for one company, which was a nice couple of people. I can't get into mentioning their names, but. Some folks from a company that still exists and then was later purchased by another company. They wanted to help us out for a while and become involved in what we were doing here.
Okay.
But then some of the things that I was saying and we're saying and will continue to say were things that their vice president didn't want to have associated with. So fair enough. Like I'm sitting on this little tiny island. I'm not like, hey, yeah, I'm selling weed like crazy. I don't make money from this thing. So I mean, I'm trying to understand that there is a future in the greater field for me, but sitting there partying with guys that sell grams for $18, I can't do that.
Oh, nobody said we'd be partying with them. We're just reporting on it. It's important for us to maintain a position like Switzerland of pure neutrality within the industry, act as a bridge between the two sides of the market. Although I am looking forward to go. I do enjoy a good party. I like to throw a good party as well.
Well, that's the last good one I went to. You threw it in Ottawa last year.
So that was a good. I caught on fire at that party.
Yeah, it was really a good time, and it was great meeting you. I think I met you there actually, or did I meet you before that?
I think I met you beforehand. I think I met you at Lyft last year.
There, same kind of thing, same event. But
we
anyway,
did a story on you sometime early.
You
last
did,
year.
yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, that's yes. I've been in some of these publications, folks. So listen, Sci at High Magazine, Sci at High Canada. I mean, that is, you waited a long time for that to be, okay to say.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's very nice that you've had me on the show. I really do appreciate it.
I'm glad you're on, because you and there's a lot of people that are in this business that I'd love to speak with and understand more about.
There
I've
are
really
some
been
really great people
folks
in this
business.
industry.
Yeah, some really good ones, and we've not had them all on. So if you're one of them, and I haven't had you on, don't think I'm dumping
I would
on
just
you.
like to point out that High Canada is not a solo enterprise. We have a really great team of dedicated volunteers that really work hard across the country every month putting this magazine together. From our proofreaders to our contributors to our photographers to our researchers and writers. There's easily over a dozen of us from Victoria to Halifax, and honestly, we couldn't do it each month without all of you.
Well, thanks. I'm sure you will find some great information in there. I know I have before, and I'm looking forward to this first. It's interesting to see these first efforts at post-legalized, to see how it is, and who's on the cover and how's it going to go, and what are the new rules.
It's causing me a little stress,
How
Alan,
bad
I'm not going to lie. I had way more hair when I started this issue.
Now you said you weren't going to lie, and you go right to Well, hey, listen, it's been great having you in, Si. Thanks very much for coming in.
A real pleasure.
The studio here, and we are looking forward to a lot more fantastic, cool people to be on the show. We know that you are involved in some aspect of cannabis, whether you're a baker of, cookies, or maybe that has left you in a place where you've got a cookbook where you decide to use all of the healthful aspects of cannabis in that way. And I know that can be done. I've met people at shows who regularly feast the taste buds with some unbelievable stuff. I want to find out more about it scientifically. I certainly want to find out more about it regarding cancer and illness and getting into shape, and the fact that the underlying theme of what I'm saying here does or would promote cannabis as a healthful substance. Let's call it an entity. If you don't like that because you're in the government or something, well, that's a rotten nightmare. I can't really help you with that. It's a fact that it's helpful.
That is the one thing I can honestly say with every single person I have interviewed, is that they have told me that cannabis has changed their life. And I have not heard that once, twice, a dozen times. I've heard that dozens of times from every single person I've interviewed, that cannabis has changed their life. And that alone has convinced me of the power of cannabis.
That's a great way to end it. That's 100% the truth. Deal with it, yo.
Deal with it.